From a heavyweight champion who accidentally inspired hip-hop's biggest name to a sexually charged soundtrack that scandalized gospel fans, Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby's 1975 comedy hides some truly bizarre secrets. Behind the laughs and hypnosis schemes lies a world of celebrity cameos, naming lawsuits, and production stories so strange they're almost unbelievable, proving this simple con-man caper was anything but ordinary. Fact 1. Heavyweight boxing legend's bizarre cameo. In one of the most unexpected celebrity appearances in 1970s cinema, former heavyweight boxing champion George Foreman shows up in the opening minutes of Let's Do It Again as a bare-chested factory worker who challenges Bill Cosby's character to an impromptu fight. What makes this cameo so remarkably strange is the timing of Foreman's appearance in the film, coming just 1 year after his devastating knockout loss to Muhammad Ali in the legendary Rumble in the Jungle fight in Zaire during October of 1974. At the time of filming in 1975, Foreman was still reeling from what many considered the most shocking upset in boxing history, having been dethroned as the undefeated heavyweight champion by Ali's famous rope-a-dope strategy. The loss had shattered Foreman's aura of invincibility and left him searching for ways to rebuild his public image and career. Appearing in a lighthearted comedy alongside two of America's most beloved entertainers seemed like an odd choice for the intimidating boxer who had previously been known for his fearsome scowl and devastating punching power. In the scene, Foreman flexes his massive chest muscles and appears genuinely ready to take on Cosby's character Billy Foster, creating a moment that feels both comical and slightly threatening. The cameo is brief but memorable, with Foreman delivering his lines in his characteristic deep voice while maintaining the intense physical presence that had made him such a formidable opponent in the boxing ring. Director Sidney Poitier clearly understood the entertainment value of having the recently dethroned heavyweight champion appear in such an unexpected context, creating a pop culture moment that perfectly captured the mid-70s fascination with celebrity crossover appearances in mainstream Hollywood films. Fact 2. The Notorious B.I.G.'s name origin lawsuit, one of hip-hop's most legendary stage names, came directly from Calvin Lockhart's smooth-talking gangster character in Let's Do It Again. But what should have been a simple tribute turned into a complicated legal battle that forced one of rap's greatest artists to completely rebrand himself. Christopher Wallace, a young rapper from Brooklyn, was so impressed by Lockhart's portrayal of the criminal mastermind Biggie Smalls that he adopted the name for his own music career in the early 1990s, using it on his first demo recordings and early performances around New York City. Wallace felt a natural connection to the character, partly because both he and Lockhart shared Caribbean heritage, with Wallace's parents being Jamaican immigrants and Lockhart himself being born in the Bahamas. The name seemed perfect for the aspiring rapper who was already known by the nickname Big due to his large physical stature, and the sophisticated criminal persona from the film matched the street-smart image Wallace wanted to project in his music. However, when Wallace's popularity began to grow and the name Biggie Smalls started appearing on records and promotional materials, Calvin Lockhart took legal action to protect his intellectual property rights to the character name. The lawsuit forced Wallace and his record label to find a new moniker quickly, leading to the creation of the Notorious B.I.G., where the initials stood for business instead of game, according to Wallace's own explanation. Despite the legal complications, Wallace continued to be called Biggie Smalls by friends, fans, and even in some of his own lyrics, but he could never officially use the name for commercial purposes. The irony is that Lockhart's relatively small role in a 1970s comedy ended up having a lasting impact on hip-hop history, creating one of the genre's most recognizable stage names through an unexpected legal dispute. Fact 3. Not a sequel, despite identical characters. Despite what most people assume, Let's Do It Again is technically not a sequel to Uptown Saturday Night, even though Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby play essentially the same characters with the same personality traits, mannerisms, and friendship dynamic. The key difference that prevents it from being classified as a true sequel lies in the deliberate decision to change every single character name and relocate the story to a completely different state, creating what film scholars call a spiritual successor rather than a direct continuation. In Uptown Saturday Night, Poitier played Steve Jackson while Cosby portrayed Wardell Franklin, but in Let's Do It Again, their characters became Clyde Williams and Billy Foster respectively. The setting also shifted from New York in the first film to Atlanta and New Orleans in the second, giving the production team enough technical differences to market it as a standalone story rather than a direct sequel, despite the obvious connections. This unusual approach allowed the filmmakers to capitalize on the chemistry and success of the first movie, while avoiding some of the creative and financial constraints that typically come with producing official sequels. The same core cast returned, including Calvin Lockhart and Lee Chamberlain, but they too played different characters with new names and backgrounds, maintaining the illusion that audiences were watching a completely separate story. Writer Richard Wesley, who worked on both films, crafted the screenplay to feel familiar to audiences who loved Uptown Saturday Night, while technically delivering an original story with fresh character identities. The strategy worked so well that many viewers still refer to Let's Do It Again as a sequel, not realizing they were watching what amounts to the same actors playing different people in a different location, making it one of Hollywood's most successful examples of recycling a winning formula without officially calling it a sequel. Fact 4. TV father and son played rivals. Television audiences in 1975 witnessed one of the strangest casting coincidences in film history when John Amos and Jimmy Walker, who played father and son James Evans Sr. and James Evans Jr. on the hit CBS sitcom Good Times, appeared as bitter enemies in Let's Do It Again. While millions of viewers knew them as the loving but often clashing father-son duo from Chicago's housing projects on television, moviegoers saw them in completely opposite roles as criminal adversaries in New Orleans. John Amos transformed from the hard-working, morally upright patriarch James Evans into Kansas City Mac, a smooth-talking gangster who wore flashy suits, sported gold teeth, and ran illegal gambling operations throughout the city. His character was everything that his television persona stood against, representing the kind of criminal element that the responsible family man James Evans would have actively fought against in his community. Meanwhile, Jimmy Walker traded his iconic Good Times role as the wisecracking teenager J.J. Evans for Bootney Farnsworth, a scrawny, hapless boxer who becomes the target of Kansas City Mac's schemes and threats. Instead of delivering his famous "Die-No-Might" catchphrase with confidence, Walker's movie character spent most of his screen time getting beaten up in sparring matches and cowering before the very actor who played his protective television father. The role reversal created an almost surreal viewing experience for fans of Good Times, who were accustomed to seeing Amos as Walker's stern but caring father figure. In the film, Amos's character Kansas City Mac actively menaces and intimidates Walker's Bootney, creating a dynamic that was the complete opposite of their television relationship. This casting choice added an extra layer of entertainment for audiences who could appreciate the irony of watching a TV father become his son's on-screen enemy. Fact 5. Gospel Family's scandalous sexual soundtrack. Curtis Mayfield faced one of his most challenging production situations when he had to convince the deeply religious patriarch of the staple singers, Roebuck Pop Staples, to record sexually suggestive lyrics for the Let's Do It Again soundtrack while sitting in the studio surrounded by his 3 daughters. The staple singers had built their entire career on gospel music and socially conscious soul songs, making Mayfield's request for them to sing about carnal love an extremely uncomfortable proposition for the devoutly Christian family. Pop Staples was known throughout the music industry as a churchman who took his faith seriously and had always been protective of his family's moral reputation. The idea of singing lines that clearly referenced sexual activity, with his daughters Mavis, Cleta, and Yvonne listening and participating in the recording, went against everything he had taught them about maintaining their dignity and spiritual values in the entertainment business. According to music historians, Mayfield had to use considerable persuasion to get Pops to agree to the project, with the daughters actually playing a key role in convincing their father to participate. Mavis Staples later recalled how Curtis explained to her father in the studio that this was his part to sing, which included lyrics about liking a lady with pretty hair, pushing the family patriarch far beyond his normal comfort zone. The resulting song shocked many of the staple singers' traditional gospel fans, who had never expected to hear the family singing about such intimate subjects. The track was even cited alongside other songs of the era as an example of what critics called sex rock, a genre that many activist groups believed was contributing to social problems. Despite the controversy, the song became the family's biggest hit and their final #1 record, proving that sometimes artistic risks can lead to unexpected commercial success. Fact 6. Christmas. One-hit timing. In one of the most perfectly timed coincidences in music history, the staple singers' Let's Do It Again reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart on December 27, 1975. which happened to be exactly one day before Roebuck Pops Staples celebrated his 61st birthday. This incredible timing meant that the family's biggest commercial success served as both a Christmas present and an early birthday gift for the patriarch, who had spent decades building the group's reputation in gospel and soul music. The song's journey to the top of the charts had been building momentum throughout the fall of 1975, climbing steadily through the rankings as both the movie and soundtrack gained popularity across the country. For Pop Staples, who had been performing with his children since the 1950s and had watched them evolve from a pure gospel act into soul music crossover stars, reaching #1 represented the pinnacle of their commercial achievement as a family group. What made this milestone even more significant was that "Let's Do It Again" would turn out to be the Staple Singers' final major hit on the pop charts, marking the end of an era for the influential family band. The song also spent 2 separate weeks at #1 on the Hot Soul Singles chart, demonstrating its appeal across multiple audiences and radio formats during the height of the disco and funk era. The timing couldn't have been more poetic for a man who had dedicated his life to music and family, watching his daughters Mavis, Cleta, and Yvonne achieve the kind of mainstream success that most recording artists only dream about. The Christmas season's success of 1975 became a crowning achievement that Pop Staples could celebrate during the holiday season, knowing that his family's musical legacy had reached its commercial peak with perfect timing. Fact 7. Real-life childhood references in characters. Screenwriter Richard Wesley drew directly from his own childhood memories and personal experiences when creating the colorful character names for "Let's Do It Again," turning real people from his past into fictional boxing champions and supporting characters. In the DVD commentary for the film, Wesley openly admitted that several of the most memorable character names were actually tributes to people he had known growing up, giving the story an authentic connection to his own life experiences in ways that audiences never realized. The character of 40th Street Black, who serves as the reigning boxing champion that Jimmy Walker's character must defeat, and was named after a kid that Wesley remembered from a summer camp that his brother had attended years earlier. This young person had earned the nickname 40th Street Black during their time at camp, and the name stuck in Wesley's memory as being both distinctive and perfectly suited for a tough street fighter character in his screenplay. Even more personal was Wesley's inspiration for Jimmy Walker's character name, Bootney Farnsworth, which came from 2 real brothers that Wesley had known in his neighborhood while growing up. These siblings were known throughout their community as Lil Bootney and Big Bootney, and they had built reputations as skilled fighters who could handle themselves in any confrontation that came their way. Wesley has explained that both of these brothers were well respected in their area specifically because of their fighting abilities, making them perfect inspiration for a character who would eventually become a boxing champion through hypnosis. By incorporating these authentic names and backgrounds from his own childhood experiences, Wesley was able to add genuine street credibility and personal meaning to what could have otherwise been generic fictional character names, creating a deeper connection between his real life and the comedic story he was telling on screen. Fact 8. Ridiculously tiny budget for massive success. Let's Do It Again achieved what might be the most impressive profit margin in Hollywood history by earning $11.8 million at the box office from an almost impossibly small production budget of just $70,000. To put this extraordinary financial success into perspective, the film generated approximately $168 in revenue for every single dollar that was spent making it, creating a return on investment that would make today's movie executives question whether they're reading the numbers correctly. This microscopic budget meant that Sidney Poitier and his production team had to be incredibly creative and resourceful throughout the entire filming process, finding ways to create a polished studio comedy without the financial resources that most major motion pictures take for granted. The $70,000 budget covered everything from cast salaries and crew wages to equipment rentals, location fees, costumes, and post-production work, requiring careful planning and efficient shooting schedules to avoid going over their allocated funds. The film's success helped establish it as one of 1975's highest-grossing movies, competing against big-budget productions that had spent millions of dollars on elaborate sets, special effects, and marketing campaigns. By comparison, modern Hollywood blockbusters routinely spend more than $70,000 just on catering services for their cast and crew during production, making the original budget seem almost laughably small by contemporary standards. The incredible profit ratio demonstrates how effective storytelling, strong performances, and smart marketing could overcome financial limitations during the 1970s film industry. Warner Brothers, which distributed the movie, must have been thrilled to discover that their modest investment in Poitier and Cosby's comedy had generated such massive returns, proving that audiences were hungry for entertaining films regardless of how much money was spent creating them. Fact 9. Historic church location. The scenes featuring the fictional sons and daughters of Shaka Fraternal Lodge were actually filmed inside Big Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Atlanta, one of the city's most historically significant African-American religious institutions. This choice of location added layers of authentic cultural meaning to the movie that most viewers never realized, as the church had served as a cornerstone of Atlanta's Black community for generations and represented exactly the kind of institution that would have supported the charitable activities shown in the film. Big Bethel AME Church was founded in the late 1800s and had become deeply woven into the fabric of Atlanta's African-American community by the time Sidney Poitier selected it as a filming location in 1975. The church had witnessed decades of community organizing, social activism, and mutual support efforts that perfectly matched the spirit of the fraternal organization depicted in the movie, where members worked together to raise money for retirement homes and community projects. The decision to use this particular church demonstrates Poitier's attention to authenticity and his understanding of how important community institutions were to African American life during this period. Rather than building artificial sets or using generic locations, filming inside Big Bethel connected the fictional story to real traditions of Black community organizing and mutual aid that had sustained neighborhoods like Atlanta's for generations. The church's interior provided the perfect backdrop for scenes showing Ossie Davis as Elder Johnson addressing the lodge members, with the authentic religious architecture and community gathering space lending credibility to the organization's mission. The stately sanctuary and fellowship halls of Big Bethel gave weight to the lodge's charitable goals, making it clear that these characters were part of a long tradition of African American community institutions that combined social fellowship with practical support for members in need. Fact 10. Will Smith's never-made remake plans. In March of 2002, Will Smith and his production company Overbrook Entertainment made headlines when they secured the rights to remake all 3 films in the Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby comedy trilogy, including Uptown Saturday Night, Let's Do It Again, and A Piece of the Action. Smith's ambitious plan involved updating these beloved 1970s comedies for modern audiences while maintaining the buddy comedy chemistry that had made the originals so successful with both critics and moviegoers. The announcement generated significant excitement in Hollywood because Smith had assembled an impressive roster of comedic talent for the remakes, with plans to co-star alongside Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence in what would have been a powerhouse combination of some of the most popular African-American entertainers of the early 2000s. Smith publicly stated that he hoped to bring together these and other famous Black stars to recreate the ensemble feel that had made the original film so appealing to audiences across racial lines. Warner Brothers was set to distribute the updated versions, which seemed like a smart business decision given Smith's track record of box office success and the proven appeal of the original source material. The timing appeared perfect, coming during a period when Smith was at the height of his movie star popularity and when Hollywood was actively looking for successful franchise properties that could be modernized for contemporary audiences. However, despite the high-profile attachments and studio backing, none of the 3 planned remakes ever moved beyond the development stage. The projects became caught up in the typical Hollywood development process, where even well-funded films with major stars attached can stall indefinitely due to scheduling conflicts, script problems, or changing studio priorities. More than 20 years later, the remake rights remain unused, leaving fans to wonder what Smith, Murphy, and Lawrence might have brought to these classic comedy roles. Fact 11. Blaxploitation parody suits. The elaborate and often outrageous costumes worn by John Amos as Kansas City Mac and Calvin Lockhart as Biggie Smalls were deliberately designed as comedic parodies of the flashy fashion trends that had become signature elements of blaxploitation films throughout the early 1970s. Film critic Armand White, who provided commentary for the movie's DVD release, pointed out that these extravagant suits with their bold colors, wide lapels, and excessive jewelry were meant to gently mock the over-the-top style choices that audiences had come to expect from gangster characters in movies like Superfly and Black Caesar. The costume designers intentionally pushed these outfits to ridiculous extremes, creating looks that were so gaudy and attention-grabbing that they became sources of humor rather than symbols of criminal sophistication. The suits featured exaggerated proportions, flashy fabrics, and accessories like gold teeth and heavy jewelry that transformed the gangster characters into almost cartoonish figures who were more entertaining than threatening, which perfectly suited the film's comedic tone. Bill Cosby also participated in this fashion satire during a memorable scene where his character Billy Foster dresses in an incredibly flamboyant red and pink suit while trying to impress Kansas City Mac during their business dealings. This particular outfit was so deliberately outlandish that it served as Cosby's own commentary on the blaxploitation genre's tendency toward excessive style over substance, with the bright colors and flashy design making his character look more like a costume party attendee than a serious criminal mastermind. Writer Chris Laverty noted in his analysis for Arts Illustrated that these clothing choices represented social progression and the essence of the self-made man, suggesting that the narrative was indirectly powered by characters who used their wardrobes as visual representations of having made it in their criminal enterprises, even when those wardrobes made them look completely ridiculous. Fact 12. Farnsworth Bentley's name origin. Derek Watkins, who became famous in the hip-hop world as the impeccably dressed MTV personality and music producer Farnsworth Bentley, took his entire stage name directly from Jimmy Walker's hapless boxer character Bootney Farnsworth in Let's Do It Again, creating another unexpected connection between the 1970s comedy and modern hip-hop culture. Watkins simply rearranged the first and last names from Walker's character, transforming Bootney Farnsworth into Farnsworth Bentley to create a sophisticated-sounding pseudonym that perfectly matched his refined public persona. This naming choice was particularly clever because it allowed Watkins to honor a piece of African-American film history while creating an identity that sounded both distinguished and slightly mysterious to audiences who weren't familiar with the original source material. The formal, almost aristocratic sound of Farnsworth Bentley helped establish his brand as hip-hop's gentleman, complete with his signature bow ties, umbrellas, and impeccable manners that contrasted sharply with the rough street image that dominated rap culture during the early 2000s. Bentley became widely known as Sean Diddy Combs' personal assistant and later as a television host and music producer, always maintaining an image of sophistication and class that seemed perfectly suited to his borrowed name. His appearance on reality shows and music videos made him a recognizable figure in hip-hop culture, where his polished appearance and cultured demeanor stood out dramatically from the typical presentation of most rap industry personalities. The irony of this naming choice is that Walker's original character, Bootney Farnsworth, was portrayed as a scrawny, unconfident boxer who needed hypnosis to become successful, while Bentley built his career on projecting natural confidence and refined taste. This transformation from the fictional underdog fighter to the real-life symbol of hip-hop elegance demonstrates how creative professionals can find inspiration in unexpected places from entertainment history. Fact 13. All 5 NAACP awards sweep. Let's Do It Again achieved something extremely rare in entertainment awards history by winning all 5 NAACP Image Awards for which it received nominations, creating a perfect, clean sweep that demonstrated just how deeply the film resonated with African-American audiences and cultural leaders during the mid-1970s. This unanimous recognition from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People represented far more than simple entertainment success, as the NAACP Image Awards specifically honored projects that provided positive and meaningful representation of Black people in media and popular culture. The complete sweep was particularly significant because it occurred during a period when many African-American community leaders and organizations, including several cast members from the film itself, were actively criticizing Hollywood for the limited and often stereotypical roles available to Black actors and entertainers. The NAACP had been vocal about their concerns regarding the blaxploitation genre, which they felt often presented harmful and exploitative images of African-American life that reinforced negative stereotypes rather than challenging them. Against this backdrop of cultural criticism and calls for better representation, Let's Do It Again managed to strike a balance that satisfied both mainstream audiences seeking entertainment and community leaders looking for dignified portrayals of Black characters. The film presented African-American characters as intelligent, family-oriented, and community-minded individuals who worked together to support charitable causes, rather than focusing primarily on crime, violence, or other negative elements that had become common in many films targeting black audiences. The 5-award sweep served as a powerful endorsement from one of the most respected civil rights organizations in the country, essentially certifying that Sidney Poitier, Bill Cosby, and their collaborators had succeeded in creating entertainment that uplifted, rather than diminished, the African American community. This recognition helped establish the film as more than just a successful comedy, positioning it as a culturally significant work that met the community's standards for positive representation. Fact 14. Curtis Mayfield's posthumous recording. In 1994, Curtis Mayfield accomplished something truly extraordinary when he recorded his own vocal version of Let's Do It Again for the first time, nearly 20 years after he had written and produced the song for the Staple Singers, but he had to do it while lying flat on his back in the recording studio due to the paralysis that had changed his life forever. This recording session took place as part of a tribute album called All Men Are Brothers, a tribute to Curtis Mayfield, which featured various artists performing new versions of his most famous compositions. The opportunity arose when Mayfield heard a version of Let's Do It Again that had been recorded by a vocal group called The Repercussions for the tribute project, and he noticed that they had omitted the middle section where Pop Staples had sung his memorable lines in the original Staple Singers recording. As Mayfield listened to the Repercussions version, he found himself naturally singing along to fill in the missing part, which gave him the idea to officially record his own vocals for that section of the song. Mayfield had been paralyzed from the neck down since August of 1990, when stage lighting equipment fell on him during an outdoor concert in Brooklyn, leaving him unable to move anything except his head and requiring him to use a ventilator to breathe. Despite these severe physical limitations, he was determined to continue making music and had already begun working on what would become his final album, using whatever mobility remained in his vocal cords and diaphragm. The recording session required special accommodations, with Mayfield lying horizontally in the studio while technicians positioned microphones and recording equipment around him. This marked the first and only time that the legendary songwriter and producer ever recorded his own vocal performance of Let's Do It Again, creating a poignant full-circle moment where he finally sang the words he had written for others to perform nearly 2 decades earlier. Fact 15. Muhammad Ali joke that wasn't. The final scene of Let's Do It Again features what appears to be a simple throwaway joke when Billy and Clyde, having successfully completed their second boxing scam, begin speculating about their next potential target by suggesting they could rig a fight between heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali and entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. This seemingly random gag line takes on bizarre and almost surreal significance when viewed alongside the fact that George Foreman, Ali's most famous recent opponent, had already appeared in the film's opening sequence as a factory worker challenging Bill Cosby to a fight. The joke becomes even stranger when considering the real boxing landscape of 1975, as Ali was actively defending his heavyweight title after having defeated Foreman in their legendary bout just 1 year earlier in Zaire. The idea of the diminutive Sammy Davis Jr., who stood barely 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed around 130 pounds, facing off against the 6'3", 200-pound heavyweight champion of the world was obviously meant to be completely absurd and impossible. What the screenwriters probably didn't anticipate was how the inclusion of both Ali and Foreman references in the same film would create an unintentional connection to one of boxing's most important moments in recent history. The Rumble in the Jungle had been such a significant cultural event that having Foreman appear in person while the characters joke about Ali created an odd kind of boxing movie Easter egg that linked the fictional comedy to real heavyweight championship history. The casual mention of Sammy Davis Jr. also reflected his status as one of America's most recognizable entertainers during this period, making him the perfect choice for an obviously ridiculous boxing opponent that audiences would immediately understand was meant to be completely impossible, while unknowingly creating this strange connection to actual boxing history through Foreman's cameo appearance.